I've been backstage, and this is going to be a lot of fun, this next session. You know, most of us here in Madison probably feel we've gotten to know Minnesota Governor Tim Walz pretty well over the past 15 months or so. And I just want to say we are ecstatic to have him at Idea Fest tonight. Before our marquee program, I do want to take a minute to thank our sponsors who really make this whole thing possible. Our major sponsors again this year are Epic, Exact Sciences, and UW Health, the Carbone Cancer Center. Thank you. We so appreciate them. Thank you. Our co-sponsors are Madison Gas and Electric, the University Research Park, the University of Wisconsin, Madison, the University, the Century House, the Penzi Spices, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, the Madison Community Foundation, Cargo Coffee, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Forward Theater Company, Leopold's Books, Bar, Cafe, and Madison College. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give them a hand. Our media partners are Hinckley Productions, Civic Media, Wisconsin Public Radio, the Wisconsin State Journal, and Madison.com. Hand for them as well. Thank you. Thanks to all of them. Backstage tonight, we've been visiting with the governor. I'm already really charged up for this. So Timothy James Walz was born and grew up in a small Nebraska town. After high school, he worked in a factory and joined the Army National Guard. He later graduated from college and in 1996 moved to Minnesota, where he famously taught social studies and coached football. The future governor became involved in politics and was elected to Congress 5 times. He was elected governor in 2018, re-elected in 2022, just as our own Tony Evers. Governor Walz, of course, became a prominent national figure last year when then Vice President Kamala Harris selected him as her running mate. He has continued to speak out effectively and with passion throughout the country against Donald Trump and Trumpism. His state has endured 2 horrific acts of gun violence this year, and he is pushing new gun laws there. We're talking, yes, indeed. We were talking how this week's shooting and the outrageousness of the reactions, of the contrasting reactions, only serves to highlight the issue again. Just a quick aside, the Minnesota governor's appearance continues our success at securing awesome speakers from our neighbor to the northwest. In our first Idea Fest in 2017, we hosted Senator Amy Klobuchar. 2 years ago, we hosted Attorney General Keith Ellison. John Nichols, associate editor of the Cap Times and tonight's moderator, says that the Attorney General told people in Minnesota that the Twin Cities should have an event like this one. I kind of like that. Word apparently got around, and so when John contacted Governor Walz's team, he was the first major commitment we had to this year's Idea Fest. And from my standpoint, that was really important. I think I can speak for everyone in this theater tonight to say we are deeply grateful to him and him for appearing in Madison tonight. Please give a warm welcome to Governor Tim Walz.
It looks like you're going to have to establish yourself with these people. Well, I was saying that was incredibly kind. I said, I hope you feel the same way when we're done. So,
could go bad. Yeah, I know. It's, you know, I just to put you at ease.
that felt loaded, didn't it?
Yeah. Just so you know, the county you're in voted 75% for you and Harris.
Highly educated people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The city was up in the mid-80s for you and Harris.
Yeah.
And some of the precincts around here busted 90%. So just so you know, it was
Good.
You might have wanted to share some of that out in other places, but
We have to figure that out.
yeah.
Man.
They liked you here. As we start out, I just want to make note, and the lights are down so we can't see it. And, you know, to be very honest with you, Idea Fest attracts an audience that includes many people who have experience in life. But I will tell you, having watched, what?
I'm seeing some pretty young
Well, this is what I was going to say. I will tell you, having watched every Idea Fest this week and in the past, aside from Bernie Sanders, the person who has drawn the largest number of young people to an event is Governor Walz. And there's a whole crowd of UW students and other folks around here. You can't see them, but they're there.
I see them.
And I don't know what it is. What is it about Walz that appeals to the young?
Man, that's a good question. I got asked last week. They said, you poll much better amongst women than men. And I looked at my wife, and she said, don't ask me. I don't know. I don't know that one. No, I do think on this, I think it's the teaching. I think spending so many years in the classroom, and I would hope what they're getting that vibe is the genuine respect, because I always said, when those of you who are teachers in this room, thank you for that, but I also, but you know, when you're a brand new teacher and that first day you go in the classroom and you know everything, and then you come back on the second day and you know nothing, and you spend 20 years learning it, I learned very quickly on, I was certainly not the smartest person in that classroom. I was usually the most experienced, as you said, but it was life experiences, and I think it was that connection through teaching, which I think is what I was truly born for.
Yeah.
Probably more so than being vice president. So
the American people gave you a cue on that one. But let me ask you about, this is an interesting thing. You were backstage before we came on. You were meeting with a bunch of young folks who had staffed rallies and events that you had done. And it was a very interesting thing. You said to them, the first political rally I went to was when I was 41 years old.
Yeah.
That's...
Look, remember the times when we had the luxury that you didn't have to be that engaged and the world didn't burn down around you, and you wouldn't see the president for like 4 months, and you're like, oh, I'm glad he's okay, and you would just kind of move on. But look, I was teaching school, actively engaged in the National Guard, and I voted, and I was engaged, but as a social studies teacher, I wasn't at events. I didn't do those, wasn't actively political. And I think it's just life was coming at me. And I tell the story, I did a deployment with the National Guard, came back, and it was the 2004 election. And I was kind of a John Kerry guy, and I got back sometime that summer. And George Bush was coming to Mankato in August of that year. And I had some fellow teachers say, Tim, we're going to be out of town. Would you take these kids to see George Bush? And I'm like, yeah. And look, I didn't really care much for the guy. At that time, I thought, man, it'll never get worse than Bush. And now I'm like, yeah. Now we want to buy his paintings and crap, I'm like, so. But I wasn't really active, and I don't think a lot of people knew, obviously probably leaning pretty progressive, the things we did, that was clear. But anyway, I said, sure, I'll take them. We get to this rally, and these kids were politically active. They were young Dems, so they knew it. And one of them pulled out his billfold and had a John Kerry sticker on it. You had to have tickets to get in this thing. And the people at the event said, well, I'm sorry, you've been deemed a threat to the president. You're going to have to go back, because you had to drive a bus to the event and get back. And I said, oh, no, they're fine. They're with me. And they said, who are you? I said, oh, I'm their teacher. I'm Tim Walz. I'll vouch for them. They're all good. No problems on this. And they said, do you have a ticket? I said, yeah. And they said, well, you too have been deemed a threat to the president. And this was my first thing, and this is in my hometown, and people are walking by. I'm like, hey, Gary, you know, saying hi to friends and stuff. Politics wasn't quite that corrosive, but anyway, I said, no, it's fine. I said, that's not true. And then it started to get kind of serious. They said, well, you're going to get on the bus and leave, or you're going to be detained and, you know, taken out of here. And at this point in time, I'm like all puffed up. I'm like, well, you know, I'm in the military. I just got back. They didn't care.
And then to be a football coach.
Well, yeah. And then I gave them this one. I said, I'm the teacher of the year in Mankato. And they really didn't care. And then I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Those kids are going to get on the bus, and I'm going to go in there, and then you're going to decide whether President Bush's speech is front page or the local high school teacher and football coach, you know, National Guardsman, gets arrested for wanting to see the president. Well, if you behave, we'll take you there. You know, we'll do that. So they stood beside me. The kids went back and said, Mrs. Walz, Mr. Walz got arrested. And she's like, damn it, you know, he can't do anything. and the whole neighborhood's blowing up or whatever, and I come home. But I'll tell you the thing was, it was more feeling a sense of shame, like the privilege of not being engaged actively in politics because of this. And there I was, you know, saying, well, I'm this guy, I do this or whatever, in front of my neighbors, and I watched these people look right through me. And like it didn't matter, and they didn't care. And I was just ashamed, you know, a little bit. I'm like, God dang, you know, we got to do something. So I got involved in John Kerry campaign. Long story, he loses. Somebody says, well, you should run for Congress. You did a good job with that. And I'm like, okay, I don't know, you know. No one, and I'm glad I didn't know it at the time, one Democrat since 1892 had won that district. And so I didn't realize I was the sucker that they were putting forward. So, but long story short, I got engaged to those young people, and people getting engaged and being there, I am just in awe of them. I'm inspired by them, that they know how it is. And that campaign, by the way, 4 of my former students, all 4 young women, super talented. 1 graduated from Marquette, 1 from University of Wisconsin, 2 from Minnesota. And those 4 women ran that campaign. And then when we started getting hot and it got into October and it looked like we were going to win, and I tell him this, Rahm Emanuel was running the DCCC, he said, all right, we're going to give you some money, but you got to get new staff. I said, keep your money, I'm keeping them. And he gave the money anyway. So Rahm gave the money. And they were, look, we were 5 people who didn't really know what we were doing, but we were pretty passionate about it. And I see that with young people. So I think that's why, but I don't know. Maybe I graded easily. That's why they like me. So.
That's a pretty good story, and I think the lesson of it is that if the Bush camp and the people around him had just been smart enough to let you in without a question, you'd still be teaching in Mankato.
Oh, this gets better. Like I win, and the first quote I get in the paper was, the press is there, and they announced that I win that night. And remember that 2006 wave? I was the last ones getting washed up on the shore when all the Democrats won. And I looked to my wife and I said, I don't even know what this job is. I had not been in the Capitol. I took a close-up trip to Washington with kids, but I had never been in the Capitol. And all of a sudden, there I was. So before they swear you in, they take you to the White House, and we go in there, and it's George Bush, who, by the way, he and Barbara were so gracious, they have you in there. But Karl Rove is in there. And remember that? Again, remember we thought he was the worst it could get. And so Rove walks up, and I was going to introduce him because I'm like all these people I'd seen on TV, and I'm like, oh, my God, I'm in the White House. This is so great. And I go over and I said, Mr. Rove, he goes, I know who you are. He goes, I have one question. Where'd you find all the Norwegians to vote? And he knew that voting district to the number, and he said, you increased turnout by 3%, and that was probably enough to help you win. And like he knew all those things that were out there. And that one kind of blew me away, that one, he knew, and secondly, how it just seemed kind of like a game to him, you know, more so like he knew the numbers and didn't know it. So yeah, and then he did say, yeah, it'd probably been easier just to let you in the event. And
there you go.
So
Karl Rove, a very good political analyst, has sussed your career out. So what you did there is a part of why you've been so successful as a political figure. You're self-deprecating, you're witty, you're charming. And
I should have brought my wife. I knew that.
Yeah. And no, but that's a part of it in politics. This is the nature of politics. But you also there told a story of a time in politics that now seems like ancient history, and that's, I find that jarring.
It's
people
jarring.
ask me about this all the time. They'll say, you know, well, like must love covering politics. I said, I did love covering politics for a long time. Now I feel it's more like a duty or a responsibility. It's a very different thing. Politics has become a much harder, crueler experience. And we'll talk about your political career a lot, but I think we should begin tonight after you've kind of framed us and give us perspective on where we were. This has been one of the most jarring several months in the history of American politics. And this week we had the horrific shooting of Charlie Kirk in Utah, and all the play out of that. And it reminded us, of course, those of us who actually pay attention, and I know that's not always the case in media, but those of us who pay attention, that up in Minnesota, not very long before, you had a horrific political assassination, a pair of political assassinations by someone who had a list of legislators, and I think you were on the list, along with the Attorney General and lots of other folks, and many Wisconsin legislators as well. And so that's the dark side of where we're at right now, because we have come to a point where political violence is not something we can say is foreign. Obviously, it's never been foreign. We've had assassinations in the past. But now it seems to be coming at us in some unbelievably unsettling ways. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, as somebody who knew several of the people who were killed, to talk about this a little bit in this stark moment we're in.
No, well, I appreciate you bringing it up. And look, it's still very visceral, and it is jarring. I heard someone on, I don't listen to NPR or something, why we still can, listening to someone mention, and they said they were making the comparison that, look, we had President Kennedy's assassination, Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, Medgar Evers. We had all these things happening, and they said, so, how it felt. And this person was an older person who was engaged in politics, and they said, yes, and when those happened, they were horrific, but they felt horrific and not ordinary. What's different now is it feels more ordinary, and that's terrifying. That's what this person said. And I don't know, I'm too close to it and too much in that grieving and processing stage of the anger and all of this comes, because just to let all of you know, the media moves on. Every single individual, but just a singular force in Minnesota with Melissa Hortman. And I don't think outside there that we know, as I said, without a doubt, she'd have been a governor, and I think a really good one. And I think in Minnesota, we talk about her in the same breath as like a Mondale or Wellstone, and she had that type. She was the most talented. I said, there's two people I saw could run a House floor, who could manage a caucus, who could message, who could think policy, and who could actually get things done, and it was her and Nancy Pelosi. And that was an amazing thing, and she was my closest political ally. And
in a big part of your success.
Oh, without a doubt. We wouldn't have got it done. We had a one-vote majority, and I said that majority has led to free school breakfast, paid family medical leave, 24. Yeah. She understood that the politics was a means to an end, and we were tied at the hip to get it done and to get a call at 4 in the morning. But what was more jarring about it is it was happening. This guy was on the steps. We're trying to get him. All that's happening in real time while we're trying to do that. And then to turn on the TV and see the President of the United States, like just flippantly saying things to me, like, he's a mess, he's doing all this or whatever. And I'm like, how do something like this happen, and how does it become about you? Or how does it become about me? And just that, the thing that terrified me in this whole thing, and it still terrifies me, just the lack of basic humanity, regardless of the politics of it, is really there. So and then as it bleeds into, and then of course we had the Annunciation shooting last weekend. We had a celebration of life for an 8-year-old, for Fletcher, and this Sunday we'll go with the parents and we'll have Harper's. That's what Minnesota's living through. And then this comes out this week, and you see the first thing is to go hard to blaming, to ginning more of this up. And I I've said this, that I don't tend to overreact. I think high school teachers in here know you'd be dead if you overreacted all the time. You just kind of do your stuff. So it's not like it. But look, it's very raw. It's very open. But I am deeply concerned, deeply worried about this. And I've been saying it on the political side of things. And now it's entered this new phase. So I wish I had something profound to tell you. But it really is about people just being decent and recognizing it and saying it. And if you're not going to do that, it's very hard to fix it. I mean, that's the thing, this whole thing about how do you fix somebody else on this. If you're not going to go to that space, I have a real hard time is how do we talk about it? How do we bring people back into this conversation in a way that is productive? And I don't have an answer to that. And I don't know if the country does right now.
I think the country is wrestling with it. I was struck by the Texas legislator and U.S. Senate candidate, James Tallarico, who's kind of rising up. And
Yeah, I like that guy.
you like that guy?
I like him.
Yeah, well, and there's other candidates, and but I was struck by his response to it because he is a devout Christian, and he, although I think if he was, as an individual, if he was Jewish or Hindu or whatever, he would have gone to a spiritual place. But he talked after the murder of Charlie Kirk and said, we certainly had differences, without a doubt, fundamental. And yet, he said, I'm taught that he is my brother, and that we are human beings of the same blood, of the same traditions or whatever. And it was this very, it was a very human and I think unexpected response, that someone would go to that place, to go to a spiritual place. And I think I was fascinated by it. I don't know what more to say.
Well, he's a good person, because I'll be honest, that's not necessarily where I went immediately on some of this, because I'm serious, and I mean it just because I've said this, and I've been very candid. I've said it publicly, and I don't like it that it's true, but I said specifically, the president brings out the worst in me, and it makes my worst self. We used to have a saying, you lay with dogs, you get fleas type of thing, and I just feel it's even deeper than that, and it pushes me in a position like I'm trying to figure out, how do you push back and debate a policy position when it is so visceral, it's so personal, and it is so loathsome of how do you get there. So I find myself getting into a place where it goes against my nature. I know it's not as generous a space as I need to be in when I see this, and I'm trying to figure that out. Look, the outrage of this week, the family and everything that went on, and you can disagree with the policies, but it was the response from some people afterwards, the very people who couldn't even call the children of Melissa and couldn't even do that. I don't understand how you can separate that. I don't understand how you can separate. I don't understand how you cannot see the children that lost a father this week and the children who lost a father and mother in June. How in your mind do you separate the humanity on that based on the politics? And yet there's a big chunk of the country is able to do that very easily. So no, I appreciate going there, and I think you're trying to find answers. I keep going back to it. I mean, I don't know how we respond as a nation on those types of things happening, and then children sitting in church on the first day of school and being shot, and then we're in this thing about, the guns or whatever. It is the guns, I'm telling you, and let's have the discussion on it. And how do you get there? And then how do you have that debate? Because it disintegrates into this, and then all of a sudden you're disrespectful on this. Like I said, we need to get meaner in our politics, and they immediately say Governor Walz is adding to this climate, which may be a valid point, but I don't know how you push back on the cruelness that's out there without yourself being a little cruel. And it's a real dilemma, and we're going to have to figure it out.
I just want to tell folks, you just saw a very rare thing in politics, which is a prominent political figure, former candidate for vice president of the United States, saying, I'm wrestling with this, I don't know how to deal with it. And that is often in politics seen as weakness to acknowledge. I don't have the perfect answer to every question, but I think that has been a part of your strength in politics. You came in late. You were born in a small town in Nebraska. You went into teaching. That was your career, and serving in the National Guard, and you had a life. And you didn't come into politics until you were an adult. Some people would even say edging toward middle age. Yep. Although in our crowd tonight, we say we're still very young. and so, but this is a significant thing. Do you think there is some chance that you came into politics having had enough of life that you were willing to acknowledge sometimes that you didn't know all the answers?
Yeah, I think so, and I don't. This is a new phenomenon that has happened. I think, I'm a big early adapter on the internet. We had a T1 line back in the early 90s. Some of the tech people in here know this, in western Nebraska, so that we could teach languages to those rural schools. And I taught myself HTML. I created a website, and I was like selling trips to Tibet on the internet. And I remember I sold 10 of them. I sold 10 of them as a teacher. I made $1,000 extra on each one, so I made $10,000. I remember this is 1991, 92, and I told my wife, I said, I think there's money to be made on the internet. And then with my political acumen, I moved on. And but
just to be clear, you didn't invest.
But I think it was the idea of a set of life experiences that were very different, and I was shaped by it. That it wasn't through. I didn't. Look, I was a Democrat, but I didn't go to the Democrats. The Democrats came to me. It was just natural. It was Social Security survivor benefits for my family. It was the GI Bill. It was Pell Grants at college. And I becoming a young adult, I'm like, well, the Democrats seem to be the people who support us, and the Republicans support the businesses and the country clubs. Not even as a pejorative. It was just known to everybody. And I think I kind of lived my life like that, and grateful. I grew up Catholic, but some of you of a certain age, like me, the priest in our small community was a liberation theologist, and that was a very interesting. Yeah, some of you know that was a very interesting.
We should explain to some of the college students here that liberation theology actually
very grounded in the social activism of the church. Very grounded in helping. A lot of these folks were active when in the 70s and 80s in Central America and others. It was especially coming out of the nuns who were there too, that they were very active. And we were strong, Catholic church every week, Wednesday, CCD, and then during certain times of the year, you had to go in the mornings, and I, as a usual kid, my mom would drag me in there. I didn't know it in our family. We had priests in the family and had people actively engaged, and they thought a priest would come out of my mom, Darlene's family, and she always said she thought it would be me. How wrong could she have been? And they went into, look where I ended up. But I just think it was that. And I am convinced of this, like we have this discussion about age in politics and about experience in politics. And I think all of you in different organizations you work for, I especially see it in school. The most successful schools, in my opinion, are the ones that have that wonderful mix of mid-career teachers who are just, getting it done, know how to do it. Those are at the end of their career who are wonderful, beloved, but ready for the retirement checks. And which is true, because you do this job until you retire, you deserve the damn check. And then, like my wife and I, the young teachers who come in, we did everything. We coached everything. We built the set. My wife was doing what were we doing? We were doing Of Mice and Men, and she's helping direct the play. I'm doing the set, so I have all my kids in there, with drills, and we're fixing stuff. And she said, Mr. Walz, we are almost at showtime. I need a door on this. I need a screen door that slams when we go out and shoot the dog, and I need it there. No problem. Come back after the little break or whatever, and there's a screen door on there. And she's like, well, thank you for that. We go home, and it was my screen door of my house. And so, but we didn't have kids. We didn't have anything else. We didn't have anything else to do. So we just did it all. And I would argue the same thing is true in politics. That there's this idea that we force force, we want young people. We do want young people in politics. We want those voices. But we also need the folks who lived other lives and had different experiences. And we need folks who have been there. The older teachers would hold us together when we needed to. And I think in our politics, the ability to get more of a cross-section. But look, all of us know why there's not a lot of young people in politics, because it's, gerrymandered districting and money in politics that makes it impossible. The idea of a teacher with no political experience, no name recognition, and I know I repeat myself because I said I was a teacher, no money and no connections to win a congressional seat is a testament to Minnesota, to be honest, that the party is there, that you could still do it. And when I got there, everybody has that story. Everybody's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, except their parents were federal judges or something like this. You're like, oh, I see. But no, I think it's that mix. And I think for me, coming in late was really good. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty agnostic about things and trying to get things done. I'll go back to that internet thing that I got on, is where I started on this, is great promise. But it created, everybody's got a damn opinion about everything. Where did we lose the thing when you didn't have to have an opinion on everything? So I don't know about that. And I remember you'd go to places and you would somebody would be talking about something and you'd say, well, I don't know shit about that. And then and you know who we would listen to? The people who knew shit. We would listen to them. And then we would say, they knew this. And I kind of took politics that way. If you didn't know, you'd go to these people, they would bring you ideas, and we would work it through. Now, there's just this idea you have to have an opinion on every single thing. You have to express it. And then I made this case backstage. I think we've got a White House that sees every single interaction as a zero sum. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose in every single situation. And look, there's no such thing as that. There is no such thing in life. And if you want to get a good trade deal, your partners need to get a good trade deal. If you want to get legislation, you've got to compromise with the other side, and you both get a little something, and it works for everybody. That's not how they see it. They have to pound someone down. Someone has to lose in every single situation. And I think it is incredibly dangerous, and it's bringing us to a point where I don't know how you govern when it's that way, because life is not zero sum. Life is not somebody wins and somebody loses, but that's how they see it. And right now, they're winning. The billionaires are winning, and they seem okay with that.
Well, when you got a billionaire president who appoints a billionaire to reorganize the government, right, at the start, and then they got another dozen billionaires in the cabinet or someplace else. I mean, this is Bernie Sanders talks about oligarchy. This is, in fact, oligarchy, right?
Yeah.
We have.
You know, the weirdest thing of this whole crazy journey and all this is I couldn't have been more surprised to wake up with my head stapled to the carpet that I would be in a damn fight with the richest man in the world. Go do something else, for God's sakes. This guy's fighting with me online and doing these types of things. When is enough for these people? When's enough money? When's enough do you have to run everything? And I'll say this, and I've talked to Bernie a lot about this. I think one of the issues that we get, he's 100% right, and he's been talking about it a long time. But I think where Democrats get ourselves into a trap is when we message some of this, it looks like we're against success, or we don't want somebody to succeed, or we don't want maybe, and I know maybe some people don't believe it, and fair enough on this with capitalism. Is there a moral capitalism where we can celebrate success? And I said, my beef is not with successful people. My beef is with people who get successful and then don't pay their taxes and act like terrible people and make it more difficult for the rest of us. That's the beef. So I don't think we've messaged that. I think, I ask people, how is Donald Trump getting some of these people to vote for him? How is he getting some of these, folks thinking that? And they said, look, Donald Trump, especially in the 80s with group people, showed this wealth. It's that ostentatious show of wealth, the gaudy gold and all of that or whatever. But there's a sense of, well, I want to make it. I want to make a difference or whatever. And I think Democrats, because we do a good job of this, we want to be there as, Hubert Humphrey said, those in the shadows of life, those that are having it most difficult. We want to lift up and help our neighbors. But I think there's a whole group of people in America that feel like those programs aren't helping them and nobody's working for their success. And I think Democrats understand the Paul Wellstone thing. We all do better when we all do better. Lift everybody up and make that case.
So you were talking about having a beef with certain folks. I got a beef with you. And this is a pretty serious thing.
You're not the richest man in the world, so it's not as scary. But,
Well, I don't know.
It's
You have no idea.
He does buy his ink in 50-gallon drums,
I've been
so that's
throwing
it.
my change into a box every night when I get home, and it's getting pretty heavy. Now I got a beef with you. I'm multi-generational Wisconsinite, and I happen to believe this is the greatest state.
It is a great state.
No, the greatest state. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
And I've also always thought that this is the most progressive state. This is the state of Robert M. La Follette.
Yes.
And all these great traditions. Yeah, they should applaud for that, of course.
They should.
Yeah.
This is the home of labor unions, the
Labor
home of
movement, stuff like this.
co-ops, yeah.
So this is my beef with you, and it's pretty serious. Back in 2010, there was a Republican wave. And your predecessor, Mark Dayton,
Yeah.
he won by about 10,000 votes. It was a very
Yeah.
close election back in
was.
2010. And so you guys stayed Democratic, and you were able to keep
Yeah.
gerrymandering in the legislature, at least to some extent, and stuff like that. And we had Scott Walker.
Yes.
And
This is a very important point. This is a divergent point. It very much is.
this is my beef, actually.
Yeah.
Because, I want Wisconsin to be just, in the Garrison Keillor tradition or whatever. It's a little bit better than Minnesota. and it, just for the last 15 years, you guys have been kind of pacing us on a lot of stuff. And so explain to me what the difference between Wisconsin and Minnesota is.
No, this is important. By the way, as a side note to this, Mark Dayton and those 10,000 votes, some of you might in here know this, but it'll really, you know who he beat? Tom Emmer, the number 3 guy in the House, who I was friends with and had gone trap shooting with and I feel like he's lost. We did an impromptu charity event in D.C. where we did impromptu theater together, and now I just got subpoenaed to go out there, and he just treats me like hell. And anyway, side note to that, look, we said this. That division, that election was the most important thing that happened, I think, in Minnesota history, and Mark Dayton's win in 2010. I squeaked by kind of with a third-party candidate, and I won that election in 2010 in my congressional district by, I think I ended up with 47% of the vote because we split it.
So you didn't get the majority.
No,
it was
I didn't
a tough
get the
one for
majority.
you. Mark Dayton did win by about 10,000 votes. It was very, very intense, very
Changed
close.
the entire trajectory of the state.
That's exactly right. And we, in that same election, went another direction that continues, although we have a very good Democratic governor now. But it
Yeah, give Tony Evers
Tony
one.
Evers,
So.
yeah. But we still have,
I'll tell you what first of all, my 2018 kind of non-official campaign, it was One Minnesota was my official campaign theme, but my non-official campaign theme, and labor unions were all over this, telling people in 2018 they had to vote, it's Walz or Wisconsin, people. We're going to go right down the way of Wisconsin. Scott Walker, we're going to lose everything. We're going to come right to work. And I will say this.
That doesn't make me feel all that good.
No, but I will say this in full disclosure. All those things are true, and Minnesotans did see Wisconsin as more progressive. Minnesotans understood the history. And to be very candid, for some of you more experienced people in here will know, but for the younger folks, this might strike you as odd. Iowa was moving with us. Iowa voted for Barack Obama overwhelmingly. So, and this wasn't that long ago. Now, I say that as an optimism. If you remember after the 2004 election, it's like we were going to be in the wilderness forever. 2006, I'm in Congress. 2008, an unknown senator from Illinois is president, and there we go. And then we passed the Affordable Care Act, and we're back down, the oscillation of this. Now, I think it's going to be harder because these guys are cheating and gerrymandering and stopping mail-in voting and all that. But once it divided, What Minnesota understood after that election was a re-energizing of the party. And I will make the case on this is, we're winning elections in Minnesota, not that our demographics are that different. We are strictly a purple state. Our numbers look almost the same as Michigan, as Pennsylvania, as Wisconsin. But we continue to win because of the party organization. And it's down to the county level, it's down to the city level. And there's just such an emphasis that we've been able to pull people over on simply organizing on a broader scale. And we get high voter turnout, just like you. So the way out of this is just going to have to be massive organization. And look, it is crap. Again, I wish I could just go home and not think about the president and not be engaged. We don't have that luxury. And it's going to have to be to organize ourselves out of it. I know it sounds like a cliche, and most of it is just grind it out, get people out there. Everybody's looking for, what's the message that Democrats can make? I don't know. I thought we were making it, but I'll tell you what didn't work. 70 million people stayed home. I have very little confidence we're going to move a lot of these people. At this point in time, you still think Donald Trump's good? You're there. You're there. I mean, that's just where it is. But there's too many people that we can get to. And I think Wisconsin is figuring that out. I think you had in Ben and now in Devon, you have a state party. You proved it to the country. The organizing around the Supreme Court special election was just amazing, inspiring. So it's organizing. And man, I'm telling you, these elections matter so much. And just the divergence between Mark Dayton's 2 terms. When I won in 2018, that is the first time in Minnesota history that there were 3 Democratic terms in a row. That's the first time it ever happened, which allowed us to build on that momentum and shift us towards a much more progressive values. And isn't it weird when you do that? We rank near the top in happiness, rank near the top in, places to raise kids, rank near the top in personal incomes and all that. And I'm just going to say it. If their policies work so well, Arkansas and Mississippi would not be at the bottom of where they're at because their policies don't work.
Well, you made me feel a little bit better, and I will just tell you that eventually we're gonna do what we have to do. And
side note here, Mississippi's last gubernatorial election, the Democrat lost by 3 points.
Yes.
Just so we know.
And he was Elvis Presley's cousin.
That helps.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Just to be clear. So good stuff, and I think soon we'll reestablish our Midwestern dominance, and then you can stop bragging about your 10,000 lakes, and we'll get on to some serious business.
We do not count mud holes like you do in Wisconsin, so we do not. We do not.
Okay. All right. I think we better get into some serious business here, and the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, Zoran Mamdani, was asked recently who, aside from Bernie Sanders and AOC, he thought was really an accomplished person, really kind of a role model in politics, or somebody who at least showed an example of how to do politics. And he said Tim Walz. And
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And as I understand it, I was talking to one of his aides the other day about this, and as I understand it, they said, well, why Tim Walz? He doesn't live in Manhattan. And he said, because as governor, he got a whole bunch of stuff done.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you just because again, as Wisconsin, I don't want this to get too out of control, but I'm going to give you a couple minutes to tell us a little bit what is referred to as the Minnesota miracle.
Yeah, and this is a key point too, and this is another thing I would tell Democrats is when you win elections and you've got power, you don't bank that political capital to win the next election. You burn it to improve lives, because not only then did you improve lives, you show the people who worked their tails off and gave you money and door knocked on this that their lives improved almost immediately. I had a young staffer who got on our campaign and worked for us, and then in 2023, we did pass everything. Paid family and medical leave, 20 weeks, most generous in the country. We did 2040. We're going to totally decarbonize our electric grid by 2040. They told us we couldn't do it. They're right. We're going to finish in 2035. And so we codified, first state to codified women's reproductive rights. We had the biggest investment in college education. If you make less than $80,000 a year, your family, and then on a sliding scale, it's free college at any of our universities in Minnesota. And just write down the list of things. We made sure that we strengthened labor unions as the core piece of this. You can't have anti-labor work. And we moved all those things as quickly as possible. There was this, and then, like, we got down to the end, we had a very racist state flag, so we changed the state flag into this new beautiful one. We got rid of some of those things. We passed recreational cannabis, for adult use cannabis. We did all these things.
We're still working on that here.
I know. But I had a young volunteer that's like, well, that wasn't so hard. We won the election and we got all this stuff done. That's great. But I saw it on that. I'm like, there's an entire generation of us who were told, just be patient. There was no fierce sense of urgency. There was no direct connection between busting my butt for a candidate, electing them, going into a session. Hell, my life's a lot better now because of this. So what happens? We win the next election, and we're there. So the good politics follows the good policy. And I think what Mondami's talking about is that also being proud on this. When I first was out there and got picked by Vice President Harris, I got put on one of the shows, and they said, well, Governor, your policies are like way out. There's these liberal policies, whatever. And I said, oh my God, we feed our children and take care of our elderly, and we can have health care and college. What a monster I am. And I think our mistake is don't let them frame us on this, because guess what? Our policies are super popular, our party not so much so. And I contest to this is because when we have the opportunity, we don't go big enough, we don't go bold enough, we don't pass the things, we don't stand with it. That's because I'll give you this. The Republicans and Donald Trump are sure showing us with this. So, and I said, we will win. And when we win back next time, we better have the same sense of purpose and urgency and Project 2025. And instead of crushing the rule of law and scooping people up and deporting or whatever, we're going to go crazy and give people health care. And we're going to go crazy and make sure that college is more affordable. And we're going to attack climate change, all these things. Just have some courage to go after it. And I think we're still so stuck in this. And this is what I go back to the beginning of this conversation, trying to work inside the system, trying to compromise. I will compromise on things if it's taxations or some of that. I'm not going to compromise on fascism. I'm not going to compromise on reproductive rights. I'm not going to compromise on climate. And I think you said it, and I believe this is true. It was Bill Clinton. It's better to be the right and weak than wrong and strong type of thing. I think we have to project both on this. I think we have to project that don't mistake our kindness for weakness, but be bold about passing these things. Now all of a sudden those casual 70 million are like, you know what, I'm going to go vote for these people because damn, it's really nice that I don't lose my job when my child had to get chemo and I can take them in and I'm not going broke because of this. And, all of the things that make a difference. We had a whiteboard when we passed all the things you're talking about all the way through. And I remember we got about halfway through the session, we had about 5 or 6 things passed, and people were like, wow, what a successful session. And it was Melissa Hortman said, what the hell are you talking about? We're doing everything. We're passing everything. And we just went right down there. We passed, you know how they turn you into the credit reporting and just ruin your credit, make it difficult to get insurance in a house because you had a medical bill that was a bunch of crap and you couldn't pay it. So in Minnesota, we said, you cannot report medical bills to the credit reporting agencies. You can't do that. Can't do it.
You wanted to be the Democratic nominee for vice president. And I'll tell you, I'd say it, and you can push back.
I'll give you the story of how I ended up getting it.
But let me take you back a second. As there was this very difficult moment with Joe Biden standing down,
yep,
Kamala Harris stepping up. Kamala Harris was raised in Madison, by the way. Right?
Yeah, I know that.
Not in Minnesota.
No, I knew that.
Yeah, okay, just to be clear. So Kamala Harris stepping up, and she needed to pick a vice presidential candidate. And in that, there was this sort of, it wasn't a campaign, but there was a point where the people who were interested in being vice president went on TV shows, and they showed a little bit of their skill. And you did that, and I would argue that you won a campaign for the vice presidential nomination without it actually being any kind of formal campaign, because you went out and you did these TV appearances. You spoke in much the way that you were just speaking right now, and an awful lot of people who didn't even know you started to say, I like that. And I think, so tell me about that journey. You can disagree with me on some elements of it, but just this sense that you went from being a Midwestern governor to being suddenly somebody a lot of people were very excited about.
Well, and it was, I would say this, and a privilege of a lifetime to be with Vice President Harris. And I remind people, just in case people, the humbleness and the work she did, just picture that you go home tonight and you're talking whatever and you wake up tomorrow. Imagine what a Sunday morning would look like with Kamala Harris as president. Just imagine, I think about that, and that's where she was, but just the humbleness of it and doing that. But look, I would say this, I think it's public service, and I don't want to, like a false sense of humility. I really didn't think that that's what we were trying to do, to try and get that. I was chair of the Democratic Governors Association, so as I was pushing there, I was doing, whatever needed to be done, and we needed to start messaging all that. It did become kind of this Veep stake thing or whatever, but when I talked to the vice president, I said, look, use me however you can. I just want to win. If that means going to Omaha and putting me there to get that one vote, which we did, by the way. And so I went there 3 times, and there was my people, but to try and make the case. But I do think it was, and I think this is a debatable piece about it, I was out there proudly espousing progressive things that we had done in Minnesota that improved lives. And I think there were people all across the country who said, well, damn it, I want that. I want to get those types of things. I wish we could do that at the national level. And I think that was part of it. And I think the real reason I got picked was I told the vice president, asked about the job, and I said, I don't know about the job, but I know what the org chart looks like. It's the president, and it's the chief of staff, and it's all the people who work for the president, and then it's the vice president down here. So just so you know. But no, I think it was out there. What I said, I think that model, remember how exciting it was during that time, though, and Donald Trump was not in the news, and all these incredible governors, J.B. Pritzker, Josh Shapiro, Tony Evers is out there, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Andy Beshear. People are like, holy shit, there's a bunch of really great governors in Kentucky, Democrats, and people were like, they're awesome. That is the model that I think we need right now, is because Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen. He got frazzled. He wasn't in the news. The media was covering Democrats and covering a lot of Democrats doing good work. And all of a sudden, that whole thing was starting to shift on him. And I remember that's when I said, look, these guys are bad, but they're just weird as hell. I have spent 60 years using public restrooms, and I have no damn idea who's next to me and what's going on with them, because it's not my business. And to think how much they took on that. And I knew during that time period, Donald Trump did an interview. It was like a 15, 20-minute interview. 11 times he's told us he was not weird. Pretty self-conscious. Pretty self-conscious. And look, I think that whole thing was the model. I'm saying this, whether it's doing podcasts, whether it's doing what, let's all just say, the joy that Gavin Newsom has brought us over the last few weeks, fabulous. And that is a serious governor running the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world, dealing with everything on that. But what Gavin understood is to get out there and fill that. Or you got Andy Beshear out there talking. Andy Beshear telling us, don't use words that people don't use in their daily lives. Talk the way they talk. And I think all of these different lanes, the more we fill them. I've been a big advocate, and I know it's not the Europeans do some things right. I think we need to acknowledge that. And right now, as Americans, we're like, damn, they do a lot of things right. The one thing they do is they have shadow parliament, or they have a shadow government that makes sure we keep them in check. And I know this is a bit controversial or whatever, but when things are going bad, and the people who do the work, which is most of us, You see what happens when you have a national strike in France. They shut the whole damn thing down until something changes. So I just have to tell you, until America can get unified, especially the working class together, those are the things we should be doing. And I think that's what was happening during that time. That's all I was trying to do. And it was a privilege of a lifetime to run with the vice. Look, you had 107 days to try and change this thing around. We didn't get there. I own that. She owns it. But I think now more than ever, there is still a path forward. Look, they know that the midterms are trouble. They wouldn't be trying to suppress the vote. They wouldn't be trying to gerrymander Texas. Hell, if your politics are so popular, you're just going to win everywhere. No, they're not. They're not going to win everywhere. The problem is going to be they make it more difficult to vote and they gerrymander the districts. So we've got to push back every step of the way on that.
So I'll give you space there, okay? I'll say you were out there in this mix of folks, and then you just used the word weird at the right time and became the vice presidential nominee
It was
of a major
terrifying.
party.
Like some of you heard the story. They called, and I missed the call, of course, which is me.
Yes.
And then I got another call and said, pick up your damn phone. She called. And it is the most surreal thing. I'm sitting in my house. 20 minutes later, the helicopters are overhead. The people sweep in. My son is like, Dad, it's going crazy outside. And I'm in my house, and they said, well, we're going to Philadelphia. We're going to get packed right now. I said, I'll go get my stuff. They said, no, you wouldn't. We'll pack for you. And I'm like, you're going to pack my underwear for me and stuff? So it's a little strange.
A little weird.
And it just went like that, and it hit the ground. And I went from no one knew. That morning, I'm sitting in Mankato, governor of Minnesota. That night, getting ready to walk out on stage with the Vice President of the United States as she's announced me in front of 15,000 people in Philadelphia and then on TV. And I meet up with her, and we're standing there in the dark, like coming off curtain or whatever, and she looks at me, and she said, don't screw this up. And I'm like, okay. So I'm scared. I'm like, the whole thing was there is I had never used a teleprompter, and I had to use one in this. Like, this isn't some rinky-dink speech I'm giving, you know. This is like a big deal. So when I got there, we had like 45 minutes. I went back in the shower of the Temple University locker rooms, and they had set up a stage with a teleprompter to show me how to use it. And I'm like, does this kind of feel like we're on a high wire with no net here? And they're like, yeah, that's it. All right.
So many of the people in the audience have not run for vice president. And
Minnesota, we're the home of vice presidents. Walter Mondale,
I mean,
Hubert Humphrey.
It's left and right.
Yeah.
You know, but what was the most incredible thing, the most striking thing, we can use whatever word we want, that you took away from that experience? What was it about being the nominee of a major party for vice president, winning 75 million votes and stuff like that? Tell me about
well, it was, and I think we all need to remember this, just the deep decency of the American people. And, you know, to be giving at these rallies or to be talking to people and listening to people's stories. A young woman in Ann Arbor, which was one of the most magical nights. It was a beautiful fall evening. The trees were colored. They had lit them up. We're doing this big rally on the Ann Arbor campus. Maggie Rogers is going to sing. I have my daughter with me. And it just felt so right. It felt so good. And I'm walking down the rope line after speaking and talking. There was a young woman there with her child. He was probably about 3. And she introduced it, and she said he lost his dad last year, and I just wanted to bring him and do these things. And people just sharing their very personal stories, and at a rally believing that there was something we could do together. And I got to see it, and I will tell you, for all the cruelness and all the people who do the bad stuff, whatever, my family got to see it in the most personal and probably the most broadcast moment ever. And as a father, I'll give you this, the greatest day of my life, the greatest moment is when I'm coming out. I'm going to be the nominee for Vice President of the United States, and my son stands up and says, that's my dad. That's my dad. And I'm like, damn right. And this country who stood up and they came after it, and some of them, you know who they are, and you know the TV station that did it. wanted to try and mock that or whatever. I'll tell you what, millions of people said, we ride at dawn for Gus. I'll tell you that they were ready to go. And that basic humanity, that basic decency, and for me to see it on a very human, they were there for us as individuals and as people and sharing our stories together. And I have to tell you, leaving Chicago, I've been through enough of these. I kind of get the feel of the play. I thought we were going to win. And I think it's for all of its kind, not arrogantly, but just like decency's going to win out here is what it felt like. And I still believe that. I still believe that. And I think we just have to do more to convince people that it matters, that going on that day and casting your vote matters.
So coming out of Chicago, you thought you were going to win. I will tell you probably that most people in this crowd thought you were going to win. Were you surprised when you got beat?
Yeah, I was. And I've been through these. I remember in 2016, Donald Trump won my congressional district by 17 points. And it was midnight. And in 2016, it was midnight. And my team was there, and I was up by 60 votes. And they said, Congressman, there's one county yet to count. And I said, well, if it's Jackson, we're all looking for work. And they said, it's not Jackson, it's Mower, which is Austin, the most traditional
Trade union town.
Great union town, home of Hormel. It's the heart and soul of that. Many generations of labor or whatever. And we ended up winning, but that was the first time since 1928 maybe that Austin went for Donald Trump. In the county, Mower went for Donald Trump, and that's when the switch happened. I won that congressional district, the 22 counties of that, in 2008 by over 30 percentage points. In 2016, I won it by a few thousand, and Donald Trump won by 17. That's the traditional, and you know the story. It's here too. It's in those counties, and we just have to figure that out. And the thing that breaks my heart is whether it's agriculture or whether it's labor, this is the most anti-agricultural farmer administration and anti-labor that we've seen. So maybe folks aren't voting on their economics, maybe they're voting on something else. So,
do you ever think about running for president?
no, I have not. But what I do think we need to, and I tell people this. If anybody tells you they're running for president, especially right now, that's a bad thing. But like I said, again, I don't think it hurts to have Pete Buttigieg on TV every night. I don't think it hurts to have Gretchen Whitmer. I don't think it hurts to have these members of Congress, these senators out there, that we just have to fill the zone and make the case and be proud of the policies that we care about and, God, get something done. I'll tell you what the American public doesn't want to have with this administration. I don't think that this administration cares about sternly worded letters. I'm just telling you that. I don't think they care. So stand up and do some things, lead on this, be there, make a difference.
So as you know, Governor Evers is standing down. There's an open race for governor of Wisconsin. And our residency laws are pretty flexible.
You got plenty of good ones here. We'll get them elected.
So I just want to make sure you're not open to coming over and making a run for governor of Wisconsin.
You got good ones here. We'll get them elected. But this is going to be big. You're right.
It is a big one here, and it's a very important one. You going to run for re-election in Minnesota?
We'll make a decision here this coming week. No one's ever got 3 terms in Minnesota. We don't have term limits. No one's gotten those terms. I will say that I'm not arrogant enough to think I'm the only person who can do this, but I'm also, it sure doesn't feel like now's the time to leave a field with what's going on. I think everybody out there. So.
Some will take that as a newsworthy comment.
No decision yet, but
I understand. Hey, we're coming around the corner, but these people seem to like you so much. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. Is that okay? All right.
It's not the Minnesota nice, the passive aggressive like you had. I was going to say it's so great to have you all here, so engaged in your community, but then I'm wondering it's maybe you just don't have a social life like me. So
You know, my mom is a good Wisconsinite. We're not so braggy, so we don't have a Wisconsin nice thing or something like that. But my mom always says, my beloved 94-year-old mom, she always says that we're always nice to their face.
Yeah.
But after they leave.
Yeah.
So just so you know, you better do well here because
I would like her. I would like her though.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, you would like my mom. But so my favorite thing you did in the 2024 presidential campaign was kind of like fix up your car. Yeah. And the big thing about it was you had a 1979, I think it was 79, vehicle, and
international.
Yeah. And I thought this could in fact be BS, right? Yeah. We don't know. This guy from Minnesota, you can't always trust him, and
all fake.
So,
I apparently was a Manchurian candidate, that the Chinese work. Yeah.
And so you're fixing it up. And the thing that sold me on you was that you had a car, the band The Cars, you had a cassette.
I did.
And I think it was a cassette.
8-track.
8-track, even better. And so
Columbia House, I never did pay them for it. And so some of you know. Yeah.
Revelation,
for a penny.
I think the statute of limitations. But you had The Cars with Rick Ocasek and Ben Orr and all these people. You had, and that was so spot on accurate, right? That in fact, if you had that vehicle in 1979, you're going to have a Cars.
I'm pretty impressed by this. This is good, deep knowledge here.
This is real.
Yeah,
we're not fooling around anymore. And
have we agreed that the Cars debut album was the best debut album top to bottom?
I think pretty close.
Oh, who's that? Somebody knows.
Yeah. But you also held out the band Boston is pretty.
I did. That was a good
as well.
one. Yeah.
So anyway, this is the thing. When you're driving around in 1979, listening to the Cars and Candy-O or whatever's playing, you're probably not thinking you're going to be spending a lot of time with rock stars. But when you get to be the nominee for Vice President of the United States, you actually get to hang out with rock stars. So it's
a perk. That is a perk.
It is, because you're into me. You are into it.
You
right?
are.
And so what I want to know is your best rock star story from the 2024 campaign.
Yes. 2. One is the campaign tells me, and it's young campaign staffers, so I don't blame them. They just didn't know, but they said, Governor, you've been using this John Mellencamp music, as your walkout song, but we got a call and we had a request at the convention if after you get your nomination, if we could play. This artist asked if you could play his music, and I said, really? Yeah. And this young staffer said, yeah, this guy named Neil Young wants you to play Rockin' in the Free World. And I'm like, what'd you say? He said, Neil Young wants you to play Rockin' in the Free World and you get nominated. And I just turned to my wife, I said, I can die now. I am perfectly dead. But
it's done.
But
I have achieved it.
The one where I didn't get to meet Neil in that case, but we're doing an event down in, I think, Atlanta or Savannah, and it was in the hold room. I spent a lot of time back by dumpsters, and they issue in, and the Secret Service, I couldn't see anybody and all this, whatever, but we're going down a hallway, and I looked down the hall, and the door was kind of open, and they're playing music in there, and I looked down there, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going there, and the Secret Service said, no, I said, I'm going to go down there, and I walked to the door, and the individual who was there singing waves me in, and it was Michael Stipe from REM playing with John Bon Jovi and Parliament, and they were practicing what they were going to sing, and I sat there and watched them, these musicians, as they were doing that. And those of you, again, of a certain age, REM was college music beyond anything we could ever imagine, and there was Michael Stipe, and I fanboyed the crap out of it. I'm like, oh my God, it was a little embarrassing, but I said, and he said, well, what song do you want to hear? I said, well, I'd like to hear Driver 8. He said, I haven't played Driver 8 in decades, and I said, well, he went out and sang Driver 8 with John Bon Jovi and Parliament, and so that's really cool.
You get to hang out with the Parliament Funkadelic thing.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it's not, that's
it
what.
is-
That's it.
That's it. That's a pretty
And
good
now I
perk.
just name drop. Oh yeah, when I was hanging out with Michael Stipe, this is what we did. I hope he remembers me. So.
We've talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and you've been very generous with your comments on it. As we said earlier, this has been a pretty tough week. But backstage, we were talking about, and you were asking me about the people who had appeared this week.
Yeah.
And you said, was this person optimistic? Did they, you know? And I said, well, a little bit down there, and the other person a little bit up, and stuff like that. And it is a time where a lot of people are really wrestling. And as we circle around to the end here, let me ask you, at the end of the day, do we make it through?
Yeah.
Do we get to the other side? Are you optimistic about where this country is going?
Yes. Supervised the lunchroom for 20 years. I'm an optimist. And so, no, I am. And I think you need to gather in spaces like this. Look, it's very hard emotionally. I went last weekend from that little boy's funeral to a wedding, and I think this idea of, in this moment, where do we find our joy? Where do we find our purpose? And I'll close us out with another of those great rock poets or whatever. Bruce Springsteen was right. It ain't no sin to be glad you're alive. And we're alive. We got a chance to change this. We have a chance to make a difference. And I think in the midst of this heartache and turmoil, we can do it. There's always reasons to show gratitude. Every morning I wake up, express great gratitude that I'm not a Republican, for starters. And then so there you go. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of Minnesota, my vice president at the moment, Tim Walz.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Wow, that was great. Thank you.